I'm going to be speaking about the various ways we can deploy things in the cloud. I'll probably be expanding on a few of the examples that Chris showed in his video. So let me start by discussing just the most basic kind of deployment, which is a static web page. I wanted to choose an example that, I found interesting. So we know that things like the NSA and encryption and spying are in the news, and of course retro is a fashion these days, so I thought I'd put the two together and come up with this. I created this page which talks about the Enigma machine, which some of you may know was an encryption device used extensively by the Germans in the Second World War and famously broken by British cryptographers. It's quite an ingenious device. I won't read you the whole page here, but the basics of its operation, the sort of thing that makes it go, are these rotors, which are disks that have random cross wirings in them. They are based on phone switches, and you can stack them together, and as you switch them around, they can make different combinations of random wirings. So you make a stack of them, and then you put what they call a reflector wire rotor on the end, which routes one from to the other. And when you put it all together, you make this complete circuit like we see in this diagram. And if you were to press, say, the B key, you would create a circuit that would light up a light, the D light, and an operator would write down what happens. And as you press keys, these rotors flip, creating a new random combination each time. So you get something that is difficult, although it turns out not impossible, to break. If we look at this example, this is a five rotor machine, and you see the keys here, and that's where the light up would go. Well, I won't go into too much detail, but I put some time into making this page, and I want to share it with people. So to just show this static notebook, we can use our big red deploy button, which shows us all the different ways that we can deploy things. I'm just going to click Published Page here. And you notice I've got static web page selected. And if I just press the button, it gives me this URL. And if I preview it, now this web page is online. And here we can see all the content. And you're looking at basically the same notebook that I was just working on, only now in the view that anyone can see. In fact, if you're a really fast typist, you can type in that URL for yourself and look at it right now. Too slow. Okay. So that's the most basic kind of deployment that we can do, but obviously we can do much, much more. So what I'd like to do now is add some interactivity. So in this notebook, I've written some Wolfram Language code to simulate that rotor stack. So if I evaluate this functions, you can see this is very, it's Wolfram Language. It's very short. But these functions together, I can use that, and I can create a manipulate object. And what you see here is an interactive simulation of how this works. So with the A key pressed on the first setting of the rotors, I'd light up B, and as I slide this little slider, I can move this a few times, and you see how each time this represents a shifting in one of the rotors, I'm creating a different random result. So here we see I press A, here's the circuit, and D would light up. And now you notice, if I select D, A will light up. The trick to how this whole works is the circuit is symmetric, so if the receiver has his rotors set correctly, when he types the message back, the encrypted message back in, he gets the plain text back out. So this interactive diagram is a real nice way to see how this works. So I'd like to share it. So the first thing that I'll do is, I have to go back and open this notebook here. Let's go back to this notebook. And let me just go ahead and place this. Now let's see, I must not have copied it. Okay. Let me just get all of my should just be able to copy and paste. There we go. And now this is part of the notebook, and we slide it. We see it's interactive. Now, right now, I've shared this as a static notebook, so this interactive element isn't enabled. So if I go back to my deploy menu, you'll notice I have a second choice, which is Cloud CDF. Cloud CDF will enable interactive elements that require calculation resources in the cloud. So you'll note that in this case, if people use this, they'll use your Wolfram Cloud credits. But I want people to be able to have that interactivity, so I'm willing to do that. So I've generated this URL. Now I preview this here, interactively embedded in here. And if you type that URL fast enough, you should be able to try this out at home. So now I've been able to share both static and dynamic content. I have some other options in terms of how I want to share this. Another choice, if I want to put this in my own notebook, but say I have a different web page where I'd like to include this, we have the ability to share a cell. This would share it as its own notebook. I want to embed this. So this is going to give me some code. I want to be Cloud CF. Make this a little bit taller. I don't know how big this is. We'll find out. So I generate this. This creates a new cloud object, and it gives me the HTML code to embed it. Make sure I copied that. And just to show this working, although this is a bit and this is how it might embed in your own web page. So this is what you would see if you embedded this object in your own web page. Of course, you can twiddle with the parameters here to get it to fit the way you want. So that's an alternative way to share some of this dynamic content. Okay, moving on. Let's see here now. I want to go back here. So I've done some static content and some interactive content. Now I want to go to full-on web applications. So in this notebook, I've created a full-on simulation of an Enigma machine. Now this code handles the simulation of the routers, the rotors. And it turns out there's another aspect of this that's not that important for this talk. There's actually like a phone plug board where you put plugs in and you can actually reroute certain letters. So I've just thrown that in for good measure to make it accurate. But I evaluate this. And this code altogether defines this Enigma encode function. And to show you how it works, here's a setting for the rotors. They go through the letters of the alphabet. And here's my secret message. I evaluate it, and I get this encrypted text. Now, if I start with the same settings in the encrypted text, you see I get back my secret message. Okay, well that's interesting for me, but now I want to be able to share this with other people. Okay, there we go. So I want to create an application on the web that allows anyone to make their own secret messages. So I use the form object, which I think Chris showed in his talk. This is fairly complicated, but it's setting up settings for each of the rotors and an area for the secret message. So this is the form object. This is sort of the contents of the form. I put that into a form function. What the form function does is it's going to read off the content of that form, and it's going to provide that as arguments to this Enigma-coded function, and it's going to return it as text. And then I'm going to cloud deploy it. Now I want to emphasize something that surprises me the first time that I learned about this. When you deploy a form function like this, you notice I just include this Enigma encode function. But when we looked up there was all sorts of other code that was dependent upon. When you cloud deploy, you don't have to worry about that. We figure out all of the dependencies that the function has, and we make sure that the cloud object is set up with everything you need. So all you do is deploy something very simple like this. Behind the scenes, the magic happens, and you get a form that includes all the code necessary to generate a secret message. And so if we try this out, be sure to drink your Ovaltine. All right, our canonical secret message. And there it is. And if we go back and set this up again, that should work. Be sure to drink your Ovaltine. So we get our message back. So that is one example of a very powerful deployment option. If you can create a sort of form-driven input thing, doesn't matter how complex it is, create a form for it, you cloud deploy it. In this case, I set the permissions to public so that everybody can see it, and then people can go on the web, enter data into their forms. Didn't need to click that again. And now they can generate secret messages on their own. Now, as an alternative, if you want to use this in some sort of other application, maybe you're making a secret World War II game and you want to generate secret-looking German messages and you want to be extra authentic, you can deploy this as an API function. So I'm just going to, we have two choices here with APIs. We can use the Wolfram language, or we can use the Instant API wizard. So this is our Instant API wizard. And if I choose this function, you notice that it sort of sets up, the wizard sort of set things up for me to deploy. Now it turns out my function, the inputs are a little bit complicated, and they go just a little bit beyond what this particular wizard is really strong at. This is a great place to start if you haven't done any deployments before and you're not too familiar with the Wolfram language. In my case, I want to do something a little bit more sophisticated than that. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to the Wolfram language. And you notice I'm going to use this API function. It's using code very similar to the form object, setting up each of the arguments, these restricted sort of guarantee that I get correct inputs. And again, here's my Enigma encode, and I ask for text out. And the way API functions work is you can apply them to these associations. So this is what gets passed in. And here's our secret message encoded again. I think we're all beginning to recognize the secret message. And so I'm going to cloud deploy that. And again, I'm going to set it to public. If I were to click this, we'll notice it doesn't actually work because I didn't give it any arguments. But we can use this handy dandy we can resend it. Notice now the URL has all of the correct settings, and here's our secret message back. And just to prove that it all still works, there you go. So that's an example of how you can do APIs. Here is just the same thing. Within a notebook, you can access it using our URL execute. You can use embed code with multiple languages, as Chris was discussing in his question and answer, to embed this in many different kinds of apps using different languages. All right. One final thing, because we're running short on time. One last major kind of deployment is what we call our instant web computation. So again, I've defined this function. I have one last problem. If I want to send secret messages to my friends, they have to know what secret keys, the three-letter combination to use. We all have to agree on what to do. Well, I could, call them up and tell them, or send them an email or something, but that's no fun. I want a secret way for them to know. So I've defined this function, and what it does is, it turns out we have the full text of Hamlet. So I've loaded the full text of Hamlet and stripped it of everything but letter characters, and then I took the day since the beginning of this year and multiplied by 3, and that's the offset I start in the text, and then I read 3 characters. And that gives me 3 randomish characters to plug in for my secret key. And every day I can go to the web page and I can know what secret key to use. So I have this function. And so today is SAI. There are 2 ways I can deploy this. The first way, again, with our instant web computation. And again, we can go directly to the documentation and use the Wolfram language, or we can use this. And so here is this one. And I would click publish, except for one problem. If I click publish, then anyone who knows this URL can go there and get the secret keys, and then they can read our messages. And that includes people we don't like. So instead, I'm again going to use the Wolfram language and cloud deploy, and the secret here is this delayed function. What this says is, don't evaluate this now, evaluate it when the page is loaded. And here's my function I'm saying today, so I can always, whenever this page is loaded, I can get the value for today. And I set the permissions so that myself and some of the people here are on the sort of list. Fortunately, you all out there, not on the list, sorry, can't get by the velvet rope. And if I click this, then you see I get today's secret combination. If I come back tomorrow, I can get another one. So pretty much what we see now in various combinations are all of the deployments. I haven't covered every single one of these menu options, but we did an instant API. We did a web computation and a form. Form-based mobile app is a variation on forms, includes some, including icons in order for it to work within our app, or later on we'll be able to embed this in Android and other apps. We published a page. We did do embeddable content, only I did it through the cell gear menu for a particular cell. So that is a quick tour of all the different major types of deployments, and should give you a pretty good idea of the capabilities of our system.